I don't know about you, but I love starting off my day with eggs, sausage, and toast. I just tried Jones Dairy Farm's all-natural breakfast sausage, and it is delicious. They make premium crafted, all-natural meat, and 100% of products are made in the USA. And y'all, they have so many options: pork, chicken, turkey, or center-cut Canadian bacon. So check out their product finder on jonesdairyfarm.com to find out where to find Jones near you. Today on CityCast Austin, the death toll continues to rise from last weekend's flooding, and Camp Mystic has now announced that it's grieving the loss of 27 campers and counselors. The numbers are still expected to go up, but at least 88 people have died throughout the state, making it one of the deadliest floods in U.S. history. We'll have more on the story in future episodes and in our newsletter. Until then, here's today's episode. New research shows that this year, Central Texas saw 65% annual losses in our bee colony over last year. Y'all, I'm not even a fan of bees, and I am shook. My guest today has not only convinced me that we need to protect our bees, but is trying to train them to kill mites that are threatening their population. It's Tuesday, July 8th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here with Dr. Garrett Slater, assistant professor and honeybee extension entomologist in the Department of Entomology at Texas A&M AgriLife. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I have a very complicated relationship with bees, and so I'm really ready to get into it. So it's been reported that Central Texas's honeybee colony population is down like 65% this year. Off top, how will we feel the impacts of that here in Austin?
Yeah. And so, I guess first off, why are honeybees important, right? They're really major important pollinators for a lot of the fruits and vegetables we eat. There's a really good image showing if you go to a grocery store, like what would be there without honeybees? And we include like nuts, fruits, and a lot of vegetables we consume every single day. So we'll see how that impacts our stores. But in the short term, we could see kind of lower products like, almonds and, fruits on the shelves.
So essentially, we're talking about the fact that honeybees are important because they make it possible for us to have all these delicious things that we love to have in our lives. So what is causing our local bees to die?
Yeah, so that's something we're still gathering more information. But when I think about colony losses, I like to call them the 5 Ps. And so I won't quiz you after this, but number one, we have parasites, we have pathogens, poor nutrition, pesticides, and poor queens. So really, the major drivers of colony losses that we're discovering now are, number one, parasites. So the major parasite that honeybee colonies face right now, and really since 1987, are the varroa mites. So they're basically really small ticks that feed on the honeybee and transmit these deadly viruses. So you imagine yourself as a bee and having a plate-sized tick on top of you. That's like how big they are relative to the bee.
Oh my God.
And they've been around since 1987, so it's not a new problem, but it's getting worse because the virus that they're transmitting is becoming more deadly and more virulent. And so it's really a combination of the varroa mites and the viruses that they transmit.
Okay, can you say what the type of mites are again?
It's a varroa mite, VARROA.
Oh, okay. That sounds kind of terrible. So they've been around since 1987, but they became an issue in the U.S. in 2005. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd probably say that's when the issues with varroa mites really started to explode, I guess. So in 2005, we've all heard about colony collapse order. And if you have not, that's when beekeepers started experiencing these massive annual losses. So before 2005, beekeepers would manage their colonies, go fishing for a few months, and the colonies would do really well. But ever since that time point, it's been around 45 to 50% annual losses.
Wow.
And this year, it's really exploded up to 65% annual losses. So it's not a new problem, but it appears to be getting worse and worse.
And is there a way to mitigate it?
Yeah, really the best thing that beekeepers can do is treat the mites. And so there's certain chemicals beekeepers apply to the colonies to actually kill the mites. And so right around 2005, the chemicals that beekeepers are using, the mice is becoming resistant to it. So that means is the chemicals don't work anymore. And then beekeepers shifted to this new treatment called Amitraz, and it's been working for the past 20 years or so. But really over the past 5 years, we've been seeing more resistance to that. And this year, I mean, most beekeepers have, mites that are resistant to this chemical. And so your question is, what is the future, right? Are there new chemicals in the works? And we do have other chemicals, but you can't apply them when it's above 85 degrees. Now, I'm pretty new to Texas, but it's 85 above 85 degrees, like, 9 months, 10 months out of the year.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes it really hard to treat the mites. We were kind of telling beekeepers to focus on these other treatments, but if you apply if it's above 85 degrees, it could just scorch and kill your entire colony.
Oh,
So
man.
this definitely makes the problem even worse. One thing that we are working on is breeding. So we have a breeding program here in Overton, Texas, at a research lab, and our goal is really to breed bees that are resistant and tolerant to these mites and viruses. So we're breeding for two traits, and one is this mite biter trait. And so some bees can actually be bred to actually find the mites, chew their legs off, and kill them. And so we're really focused on breeding for that trait. Yeah, because
Wow.
if we can breed for that, that's the most sustainable solution, right? We can have
Yeah.
less reliance on chemicals, but then it'll be the most effective way to manage the viral levels.
I mean, that's kind of hardcore that you can breed bees that'll find them and like bite their legs
Yeah,
off. I kind of love it.
yeah, mite biting, mite hunting. Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. Like the ones that aren't bred for it, like they'll have mites on the back of their legs, for example, and they won't even notice it. But they have the ones that are bred for the mite biting, like they'll be like really sensitive to it. They're like, "Whoa, there's a mite on top of me. I need to get it off me," and tell their work friends to come get them off them. So I think this could be a really big game changer, not only for
Yeah.
beekeepers and Central Texas, but really across the country.
That's incredible. So, okay, like I said, I have a complicated relationship with bees. I'm afraid of them because I'm allergic, and I know a lot of people are. And a long time ago, my first instinct would be to smush them out of fear, just like kill it. But then I was told to never, ever, ever kill a bee, ever, ever. Can you explain why it is so important that we never kill bees? And if we do, how it affects the bee population as a whole?
Sure, sure. I mean, first off, honeybees don't bother you unless they're disturbed, right? So if you just see a honeybee flying around, going to a flower, maybe you spilled some sugar on the ground and they're eating it, the bees don't want to bother you. Like bees are pretty docile and they're just trying to do their job, right? The bees are flying at the colony, they're trying to get sugar to feed the young little baby. Bees inside the colony. So they're just kind of doing their job. I think a lot of people confuse honeybees with like wasp or, other bees, but in general,
Mhm.
most honeybees are really docile and just really, really calm and easy to work with. So, and if you kill that one bee, that could, that could cause them not to bring the nutrients back into the colony. But I mean, if you have to, that's okay. There's still 20,000 bees in the colony, but try to avoid it if possible.
And so you've been a beekeeper your whole life. And so upon hearing about bees dying, some people they want to help. And so, so they think that they want to start their own bee colony. Like they're like, I could be a beekeeper. I'll start my own bee colony. Can we talk a little bit about why maybe they should or should not do that?
Yeah, if you want to get into beekeeping just because you want to save the bees, then that's probably not the best option, right? I mean, the best option is really to plant flowers in your garden or around your house, like something that helps not only the honeybees but the native pollinators. Try to use pesticides that are bee friendly. So if you go to the store and you want to use a pesticide to kill some kind of pest in your garden, there's usually a really cool animation on the back that says whether it's bee friendly or not. So those are really the best options to really help not only honeybees but also the native pollinators. If you want to help the bees by getting your colonies, it's really hard to keep bees alive, as we're seeing. 50% of bees are dying every single year. And so I think a lot of people get into it because they want to save the bees and they realize just how hard it is to actually, keep a colony alive. We hear in the news that 65% of bees are dying every single year. But the one thing that's great about bees is you can split those colonies in half and make up those numbers, right? We have about 3 million colonies in the United States, and even though we lost over half of them, beekeepers can split those colonies and make new colonies to get those numbers up again. Now, they'll be smaller and they won't do as well with pollination or honey production, but that's one major benefit of honeybees. We're definitely concerned because these losses are happening every single year, but it's not like they're going to go extinct. Now, the ones that probably having the biggest issue are our native pollinators, right? Like our bumblebees, those bees that we don't manage, and we don't really know, how much they're dying, right? So if honeybees are dying, what about these native pollinators that we can't manage and make up those numbers? And so if you really want to save the bees, the best thing to really do is plant flowers and plants that are really great for honeybees, but also some of these native pollinators that are, probably equally important.
What I'm hearing you say in a very nice way is leave it to the professionals and let people that know what they're doing, have a colony and just plant some great flowers in your yard.
Exactly, exactly. And this is something that anybody can do, right? I mean, it can
Yeah.
be different ages, you can be, different places in the city, and that's the best thing you can do to really support the bees.
You know Jaws, but did you know the guy who wrote it worked for LBJ first? He helped shape a presidency, then he unleashed a shark that changed movie history. This Shark Month, the LBJ Presidential Library invites you into the world of Peter Benchley, author of Jaws, Ocean Advocate, and former White House insider. Discover how he went from writing speeches from President Johnson to writing Jaws, the blockbuster that changed the ocean forever. Explore the man behind the shark and his real-life fight to protect the seas. Celebrate Shark Month in style with From the White House to the Deep Ocean. It's more than an exhibit, it's a deep dive into legacy, fear, and redemption. Dare to explore at lbjlibrary.info/jaws. So in 2012, lawmakers passed a bill to give beekeepers an agriculture exemption on their property taxes. And so I'm curious, how did this change beekeeping in Central Texas? Did it change the game at all?
Yeah, so in 2012, they passed a law, right, that you could have honeybees and you can get a tax valuation on your property taxes. If you have somewhere between 5 and 20 acres of land and you have honeybees on your property, you get a major tax valuation for your property taxes. And so because of that, a lot of people got into beekeeping because I guess one, it's easier to have bees rather than have cattle or put into other
Right.
agricultural commodities. And so there's been a huge increase in beekeepers really because of that.
Okay, so I'm giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, thinking that they became beekeepers because they wanted to save the bees. But now you're telling me that you could get a huge tax break too on top of it.
You can, yeah. I mean, it's sort of multifold, right? I mean, if you have bees on your property, they're pollinating your trees and your flowers, and so not only for you, because bees fly 3 miles away, so it can benefit your
Oh,
neighbors, or
wow.
if you live in the city, it can pollinate some of the plants and trees around the Austin area, for example. But I mean, probably the major push is because of these, tax breaks.
Did it change, I guess, access at all to people that are more like career beekeepers like yourself? Did it change? Did it affect you at all?
Yeah, I think it led to more beekeepers doing it for their primary form of income, right? So like more professional
Yeah.
beekeepers getting into it because, you know, what they started doing is you have these professional beekeepers that manage colonies and put bees on other people's properties so they can get that tax
Ah,
valuation. Yeah, so you have a
okay.
lot more beekeepers like that. But it's been great because there's more beekeepers in the state, and that led to more local clubs, led to more education. And so I think a lot more beekeepers are really aware of the problems and aware of what to do in those type of situations and how to deal with some of the problems that, honeybee colonies face.
So I keep seeing these videos about bee infestations where someone will like lift up a trash can lid or the side of a house and it'll just be thousands and thousands of bees. Is that as common as it seems like it is?
Yeah, it's actually really common, especially here in Texas. I'm actually from the Midwest, as you can tell by my accent, and we don't have any any feral colonies or bees living in the house, just because bees don't swarm as often. So, I guess with a honeybee colony, right, when they become overcrowded, half that colony and the queen will fly off and form a new home. And oftentimes they'll go into maybe like a roof or into a shed or into a tree because they're basically finding a new place to build their home, right? So when you hear about these bee removals or you have a bee living in your house, for example, these bees are actually coming from another colony, splitting off and forming a new colony elsewhere.
So Austin is an official bee city, right? We, I guess, have some sort of recognition as being an official bee city. We have a pollinator week that happens, and you know, I think we're pretty serious about our bees here, but our native bee colony is still declining and it's being overrun by European honeybees. Is that something that is as big of a deal as I'm hearing that it is?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question, right?
Oh,
So I
okay.
get well, and they're probably saying like, if you have more honeybee colonies, is that having an effect on native pollinators, right? So if you have a
Yeah.
lot of people getting into beekeeping, are these bees outcompeting the native bees for flowers? Is that leading to virus transmission, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's kind of a mixed bag, like what we're kind of seeing is that honeybees and the native pollinators tend to forage on different flowers, but there's not a lot of flowers around. They'll probably be competing each other for the same flower. So it really depends on what's around. So there's certain flowers that, the native pollinators really prefer, whereas other flowers that the honeybee colonies prefer. But one thing that we are seeing is that some of these viruses can be transmitted to native pollinators. And so when you have a honeybee flying out going to a flower, for example, they can spread that virus onto the flower. So when a native pollinator jumps to that flower, that virus can be spread to the native pollinators. And so we're definitely seeing that if we sequence native pollinators or even wasps, that they have some viruses that originate from honeybees.
It's like a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, one thing about native pollinators, we don't really know how many are out there, right? There isn't a lot of researchers going across Texas and saying these are the native pollinators out there. I mean, we've identified maybe 2,000 species of native pollinators specifically in Texas, but we're probably just scratching the surface to be quite honest. And so we don't really know, like, one, what's out there, two, are they declining, and three, what can we do to help them?
You mentioned like they don't pollinate and it takes away from all these things, but can you give me more of like a magnified view of what that means, like how it affects the ecosystem, how the ecosystem breaks down?
Yeah, I mean, imagine any type of flowering plant, right? A lot of them aren't, self-pollinating, and the only way that they can pollinate is through bees. I mean, for most cases. So that means is you have certain plants that are producing the pollen, certain plants that are going to produce the fruiting body, like a fruit or something like that, for example, and you need bees to physically bring that pollen to that other plant so they can blossom and really propagate in an area. So, I mean, without not only honeybees, but native pollinators, you may see differences in flowers, you may see differences in blossoms, you may see less fruit on your trees. And so just like ecologic, it can impact everything that we see today. And I think sometimes we take that for granted, right? I think if you had like a vacuum, you took all the bees out, really our entire, landscape would look quite different.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So we're just talking about essentially just keeping our plants alive.
Yeah, plants really rely on bees to do that pollination, and without
Yeah.
without bees, I mean, there's other pollinators, but they're not as efficient and as good as the bees.
As y'all may know, I am a night owl, but I also have insomnia. This means lots of times it's hard for me to get to sleep. So when I hear about something that might help me fall asleep faster, I'm all ears. I found out that cooler temperatures facilitate the body's natural drop in core temperature at night, promoting the release of melatonin, and everybody knows that's good for sleep. Enter Cozy Earth's temperature regulating sheets. Right now, you can try these sheets with no risk. You get a 100-night sleep trial and 10-year warranty on all bedding products. That's a full decade of cool, quality sleep. So go to CozyEarth.com and use our code CozyAustin for 40% off best-selling temperature-regulating sheets, apparel, and more. That's CozyEarth.com. Sleep cooler, lounge lighter, and stay cozy. I'm curious about what a day in your life is like as a beekeeper. how does your day kind of shake out?
I'd say it really depends on the time of the year. And so honeybees go through these different stages throughout the year. So, in the winter time, I guess winter in Texas, bees are kind of in a cluster. They're just kind of hanging out until it starts getting warmer. And then right around February, the bees start, growing and building up. And so what we're doing is we're either splitting the colonies in half to make up for our losses. We may be raising new queens to put in those colonies. And then we're adding more boxes because as they start bringing in nectar and converting that to honey, they need more space to hold that. So we're adding more boxes in that case. We're also monitoring for, the mites and the viruses throughout the year. So, once a month, for me, I guess I go out to my colonies and do a quick wash to see how many mites I have in my colony. And if they're really high, I'll do some sort of treatment and management for those. But then really right around kind of mid-July, late July, that's when beekeepers are pulling the boxes off, and that's when they begin extracting and eventually bottling their honey. So really in the next 3 weeks to a month, you'll start seeing beekeepers, pull those honey supers off where the honey is stored and then start extracting that honey and then bottling it for the stores. And then, at the end of the year, probably in the fall or so, their beekeepers are basically preparing their bees for the winter. So, feeding them sugar syrup so they have enough food to make it through the winter. Because one reason that honeybees produce so much honey is because they're basically hoarding that honey. Because as you can imagine, if you have 5,000 bees in a colony and they're trying to keep themselves warm throughout the winter, they go through a lot of sugar to produce that heat to make it through the winter. Now, I'm from the Midwest where the colonies need about 120 pounds of honey to make it through the winter because it can get to like -50 in, North Dakota where I'm from.
Woohoo!
And
Oh
so,
my God.
and if you put a sensor inside a colony, they'll keep it at exactly 95 degrees in the colony, whether it's 120 degrees outside or whether it's -50 outside. And the major reason they keep that warmth is through the honey that they're storing. Because really, any bee and wasp, they produce a small amount of honey, but honeybees hoard that honey just so they can, live through the year.
Wait a minute. So you're saying all bees and wasps produce a small amount of honey?
A small amount of honey, I mean, just for themselves, but they're not hoarding large amounts.
Oh,
So honeybee colonies there's about 5 to 20,000 bees in a colony, right? And there's a queen and a bunch of workers. And they have that colony throughout the entire year. So it's not like they go through hibernation. But for native bees, what happens, they form these small colonies, but at the end of the season, the rest of the colony dies and the queen goes into a hole and hibernates. Same with like a wasp, right? So they don't need that honey to make it through the winter. Bees are hibernating. Whereas bees,
what?
they need to keep all 5,000 bees warm and alive throughout a cold winter, for example.
Oh, I had no idea that the colonies die off for other bees. I didn't know that.
hmm Yeah, so like
Wow.
bumblebees, for example, right around August, September or so, the whole colony will die. The new queen will just kind of burrow into the ground, and then once it becomes spring, she'll emerge again and then really build the nest from scratch, start laying the eggs and building the nest. Whereas honeybees are always a colony, whether it's middle of summertime or the winter.
So they are always working. Is there a difference that like in sight that I can tell like just by looking at them?
I mean, for me, I can. I guess I've been around enough. But some people do confuse them.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah, some people do confuse them, but I mean, honeybees are they're fuzzier. And so if you have a
Okay.
wasp versus honeybees have a lot of hair on them, and where
Okay.
a wasp has a little bit of hair, but they're kind of they're
They're
basically
longer.
almost hairless, a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a major difference. Like there's different sizes. So, obviously
Yeah.
carpenter bees and bumblebees, like they're quite a bit larger than a
Wow.
honeybee or like a sweat bee. Like they're really small. So you can kind of tell by the size. But if you do confuse a wasp and a honeybee, and I get those calls and pictures all the time. So if you are confused, you can send me a picture and I'm happy to diagnose it.
I have kind of a silly question. Do honeybees have stingers?
They do, yeah. So honeybees have actually like a barbed stinger. So that means when they sting you, they die afterwards. So honeybees can only sting you once, whereas other bees like bumblebees and wasps, for example, they have a smooth stinger, so they can sting you multiple times.
The only time I got stung by a bee, I think it was a honeybee because it was kind of barbed. And I felt so bad because I think it landed on the back of my leg and then I closed my leg and it
Mhm.
stung me. And then I was like, oh no, there's like, I thought I had squished it by like
Sure.
closing my leg or whatever. But it turns out I didn't know that they die if they sting you. I didn't know that. That's even sadder. That makes me really sad.
Yeah. And no worries. Once you get stung a few thousand times, you get used to it. So you're almost there.
Oh God. Only got, a couple thousand more to go, and I won't need my
Exactly.
EpiPen at all. I won't need it. Okay. Now, I keep hearing that there are benefits to eating local honey from local bees. Like I hear that there are benefits for like allergies, there are benefits for, asthma and stuff like that. Is that true?
When bees are making honey from nectar, they're also putting pollen into that source. And so the thought process is if you're eating local honey, you're eating that local, pollen source, and then, you won't have as much of a reaction to,
Yeah.
the pollen in the area. So I know, especially here in East Texas, we just get swept with pollen. Like our vehicles are just like yellow or greenish
Yes,
color. Yeah,
yes,
which is probably
yeah.
the same in Austin, I'd
It's
imagine. And
so bad.
so
It's so bad.
yeah. So it's not process if you eat it beforehand, your immune system is more prepped, I guess, for the pollen.
That's amazing. So, okay, every time a bee is around me, everybody is just like, just be still, be still. They won't bother you. Be still. They can tell when you're nervous. What is your advice for someone like me that has a healthy fear of bees? Like, when a bee is around, what do I do? Do I really just be still and like don't mess with it and it'll go away?
Yeah. This probably isn't the best for audio, but I guess if you do have like a bee flying around, like a honeybee flying around you, the worst thing you
Yeah.
do is start like swatting at it around your face. Because if you do that, the bee's gonna fly to the motion and then they'll go right to your face, right? And so the best thing you do if the bee's flying around you or a wasp is move your hand kind of to the side, like you're flapping your arms like a bird, because then the bees will kind of fly to your arms. Most of my colonies are pretty laid back and gentle, but I'll have some aggressive ones, and they might be flying around my
Yeah.
face. And if I start flapping my arms around my side, they start going to your arms, for example. Because bees, there's something that like bees can't see, like they hate dark colors, right? And so that's one reason they fly to like your eyes or your ear cavities because they're very dark. Or if you wear like a dark
Garrett, I
wristwatch.
always have on black. I always have on black. This is why bees are always messing with me.
Yep, it's bees hate black. So
Damn
that's that's why you have bee suits that are white, right? Because that keeps bees, really calm. Like if you were, I mean, I have a
What?
wristwatch, like a black wristwatch, for example, and if I go out to the field, like I'll get stung quite a bit around my wrist because the bees are great going to the black and stinging my arm. And really the thought process is, I guess, like a natural way for bees to defend themselves from a bear. Bears are dark, they go into the
Yeah,
bees and,
yeah.
steal their honey and their brood. And so I don't know, that might be one reason why bees don't like black, but they hate the color black. Bees do sense nervousness, right? If you have anxiety, for example, like they can sense that, and if they're not bothering you, especially honeybees, they'll just kind of go fly on their own. But they kind of start kind of flying around you, maybe kind of flying around your head. Then I recommend
Yeah.
kind of moving your arm to the side so the bee can fly out there, and eventually they'll just get bored and fly off.
Oh my gosh. Garrett, thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting with me about bees and giving me all these survival tips that I that I need to know.
Thank you for having me. Happy to help.
That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Garrett's work in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.